Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. This is the third episode of the Up Your Brave live stream panel discussions. Now, this is where I bring amazing people here so that we can together raise the state of resilience, health, and happiness, not just in New Zealand, but on a global level. So I'm super excited today to welcome my guests. My name is Natalie Cutler-Welsh, the go-to girl. And today I'm going to introduce my guests to you. Here they come. We've got Tui Fleming. She's a strengths coach and works with companies all across New Zealand. We're going to get a bit more info on each of them later. We've got Elias Canaris, who I also know from the Professional Speakers Association, massive background working with companies and speaking all over the world. And same as Greg Ward, very busy, usually on the traveling circuit, not at the moment. Working as in the area of entertainment as well as speaking. So I'm excited to hear from you guys today and really chime in, see how we can support and help people, particularly now. At the time of filming this, you guys, we are, I think, in week 4 of lockdown. I know my sister's in San Francisco. They're a couple of weeks ahead of us. So on a global scale, we're facing massive challenge. But today we're going to dive into some tips and some strategies for leadership, not just during COVID, but generally during times of challenge. So I'm going to go to Tui first. Tui, I would love it if you could elaborate with a little bit more background on your experience with leadership. I know you speak in a lot of schools, you go and you work with various companies. Give us a little bit of background, and then if you could share one of your tips or a little bit of guidance for people in this area.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So hi, everybody. It's really great to be here speaking with you. And it is interesting at the moment. Obviously, we are in a time of crisis and we're talking about COVID, but we do need to know who we are, because who we are is how we lead. So this is really a time where we can be quite aware, self-aware, quite introspective if we have and are able to take the time to really look at ourselves in terms of who we are as leaders. And in my 20 years of leadership development and working with leaders, yes, as you say, Nat, in New Zealand and around the world as well, one thing that I noticed over the years is that many people struggle to show up as who they truly are, really, truly, authentically and courageously. And so over the years, my past, I was a marketer, but I spent a lot of time in leadership development and personal and professional development. And so over the years, I took a lot of what I had learned and retrained many times over. As you said, Nat, I'm a Gallup strengths coach. I'm also a yoga and meditation teacher. I practice desire mapping, and I'm trained in Brené Brown's research. So I weave all of that together. Yeah. And that's why I say who you are is how we lead. That's from her, and I believe that. And so I weave all of those things together into a practice in authentic leadership, which helps people to really show up as who they are. Now, what I find really interesting is that many people have done this out of need. In just the last few weeks, there hasn't been a choice as to hiding behind your armor or hiding behind, any role that you play. People have had to step out from behind any of that. And, we've seen the Prime Minister, we've seen many CEOs, many leaders in their sweatshirts, in their sweatpants, coming to us live, truly, authentically, and speaking from their heart. So I think that's really, really encouraging. And that is what I help people to do. Something that came through the research that I have been following recently from Gallup as a strengths coach, and this was research that they did and have been doing for years, is looking at the 4 qualities that followers want in leaders, particularly in times of crisis. And now we're in that now. And so I'll share those with you now. I think it's quite interesting. They are compassion and hope and stability and trust. So what I've seen with people as they've started to step forth into their authenticity is a lot of compassion and hope. I think probably arguably those are easier perhaps to demonstrate and to offer than the other two. So where I've really kind of stepped into my own over the last few weeks is helping people, certainly with those 2 things, but more so with the other 2, with stability and trust. Because I think when you can trust yourself and when you can find a sense of center and groundedness and stability within yourself, no matter what's going on out there, then you can feel so much more confident, so much more resilient and able to navigate the change that we are in.
I love that you highlight that. I'll just jump in because I know a lot of people have heard the term, fake it till you make it. I don't like that term at all. And I think it's so important what you said is for people to trust who they are and to actually be that person. And especially in times that we're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you asked for a tip. One of the things that will happen when you really get clear on your values, on your strengths, on your desires, and how you really want to feel, as opposed to how you are reacting and how you are feeling in the moment. When you get clear on those things, you will be far more mindful, and you are able almost to stop and pause, check in and connect with those. And in so doing, that can reduce your anxiety. So obviously we've seen and we know that many people are feeling heightened anxiety at the moment. So one of my tips, and I've been using this with the clients and corporates I've been working in, but also, as you said, I work with schools and students. And for the kids, they don't know all that we know. And maybe that can be a good thing, but it's very unclear and uncertain for them. So the tip is to reframe any of your negative feelings. And I'll tell you how you can do that. It's very simple. Often what happens is we feel anxious, or we feel uncertain or fearful or sad, angry, whatever it is. And we find ourselves saying, I am anxious, or I am fearful, whatever the word is. And when you say it that way, you are almost taking ownership, and you're defining yourself by those emotions. But we are not our emotions. Emotions are energy in motion, and they need to have space to be able to move through and be processed. We can do that by reframing our mind and our language. So the reframe for I am anxious would be, I'm noticing that I'm having the feeling of being anxious right now. So there's three parts to that. I'm noticing, and noticing is part of mindfulness. It's responding versus reacting, that I'm having the feeling of. So you're naming it as a feeling. So in that way, you can detach a little bit from that. And then you time bound it at the moment or today. So it's not forever. And that gives you that hope that actually you can process through that. So that's a really easy reframe that adults, children, everyone can use whenever they are feeling heightened emotions, more so of a negative kind.
Yes, and I definitely think people are feeling that at the moment. So for those of you that are watching us, we've got a few on the live stream. I know we'll have a bunch more with the replay. Go ahead and comment. I would love to, first of all, we'd love to know where you are geographically, where you're watching from. And yeah, it's interesting about the emotions. I think a lot of people go through life normally being so busy, not acknowledging how they feel. It is a good time for people to acknowledge now how they do feel, but not to get stuck in that, and not, like you say, to take ownership. So that's nice. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Elias. So as I mentioned, Elias and I met through the Professional Speakers Association, and he's been president there and all sorts of things. And I know you call yourself unapologetically supporting Christian leaders. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit more as well. Give us a bit more background into what your journey that brought you here to working with so many leaders. And then, of course, the first tip that you want to share with us.
Look, absolutely. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here and amongst some incredible panelists that you've managed to pull together. My journey started off in the corporate world, probably not unusual to a number of others. And during that journey, I became a senior consultant, and I used to work with organizations to help them to restructure their business, and usually within a call center environment. But what I soon found out is that leadership is about building trust. And already I heard Tui mention that. And it's so important that as we do this, as I understood how to build trust and apply that within my business, and then go out in the speaking industry and had the opportunity and the privilege of serving as the president of the Global Speakers Federation, which is a $6.5 billion industry that has a global reach to 53,000 thought leaders around the world. It was a privilege to be able to work with people in multicultural environments and lead a team that was spread over 20 different countries and help them to help their members to grow their business and to be thought leaders. Tui mentioned something, and you alluded to this, Natalie, in terms of being unapologetically Christian. I am an unapologetically Christian, and I've enjoyed my journey of faith. And Tui mentioned about anxiety. And I just recently released a new podcast called Lean on Phil. And Phil is actually not an individual, but it's a scripture that goes in the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. It says, be anxious for nothing. Now, if a person of faith understands that scripture, it's easier said than done. I think Tui's given us some great tips and techniques on how to manage your feelings, because you do get into this crisis, and COVID is a crisis moment. And we have to understand that when you come into a crisis, you've got to adapt. And I think one of the tips I'd give people is that we have failed, I think, as individual and as a nation, to understand the power of margin. Now, let me explain what margin is. You can see there's a book just to my right. And that book, when it was written, contains words. But the words weren't written from one edge of the page all the way to the other edge. Otherwise, it'll be difficult to read. You need to have a margin around that, some white space that you can use to help your brain understand what's going on, to make sense of what's going through there. Sometimes we use the margin to make notes. And we have to understand that as individuals and as leaders, we have to take some time out to have some personal white space or margin in our lives. And that's something that Jim Collins wrote about in his book, How the Mighty Fall. How much time are you taking aside as a leader to grow yourself, to just sit and reflect, to be able to sit there and say, what's happening? What do we have to do? And how do I change? And boy, have we had to change. Our industry, well, Greg and I, we were in Berlin together, Greg, and a number of other places around the world. And suddenly one day, a little microscopic virus turns around and stops you from traveling, stops you from hosting your business. And we've had to change and pivot. And I look at Greg. In fact, I like him so much, I think I'm going to become Greg and just replicate what Greg does. So all of these things are now designed to work through. That's the beauty of having a home office. You get people walking through in the background of your home office just to grab bits and pieces out of your office. But it's all about margin. Can we create margin? Can we do things that change the way that we think? That's the tip that I'd give you to start off with.
Oh, love it. You know what? It's funny. I find myself tempted to make notes as we go along. But I'm, of course, going to go back. For those of you listening, you're probably taking notes. I will go back and write up some of these key points. And of course, both Tui and Elias so far have mentioned a few resources. So I'll be putting some links in because there's so much gold here today. So many good points. Thank you, Elias, for that. And now we're going to go to Greg, who I always say, man, you have such a smooth radio voice. Wait for it, people. So as I mentioned, Greg is an entertainer, MC extraordinaire, but also a respected speaker. So I'm pretty excited to hear from Greg about his thoughts on leadership in the today. So can you kick off with a little bit of background on you?
Yeah, I sure can. And thank you very much indeed, Natalie. I'm putting on my best radio voice right now for it. Sit back and listen to the soothing sounds of leadership coming to you directly here from Natalie Cutler-Welsh. This is a fantastic opportunity for us to be able to discuss what's actually happening here in the present moment, because the present moment is something that I am absolutely 100% invested in. This stems from a background as a professional actor working in theatre and TV, and also for the last 22 years working in professional improvisation. And in improvisation, all you have is the now. And how you deal with the now creates the depth and energy of a particular scene. And so this particular situation has allowed me to use so much of my background in a crisis moment. And I think one of the factors that Tui talked about was around authenticity. And it's in situations like this, when you're in significantly adverse situations where the veneer of society is peeled away and we are revealed in that situation. And that has a wonderful sense of good for us as individuals and as a society, because we become who we are to those around us as well. And it's in those moments of crisis where you realize that you actually have a great deal more available to you. We think that we're operating at the top end of the game. And there's a wonderful quote from the United States Marines that when you're at the point of giving up, you're actually only 40% in. And it's the brain that's always going to drive you forward. The body will give up, your brain will try and give your body up before your body will give up, if that makes any kind of sense. We have so much more resilience available to us, but we have this little switch that goes, no, surely, no, you can't go any further than that. The reality is we have so much more. I think as leaders, these moments are perfect times for us to reflect. One of the things that I've noticed is that there's an old adage which says you don't know what you don't know. But when we get into certain situations like this, where the fight and flight situation comes into our limbic system and we are under pressure, we sometimes find that we don't know what we already do know because our field of focus narrows. These are the moments where we can sit back, take a moment and reflect and realize that there are decisions to be made. And decisions, the way that you're feeling, if you're feeling in a flux situation, or if you're not sure which way to go, it's a moment of reflection to be able to step back and go, I just need to make a decision. And the decision doesn't need to be the right decision. This is a real factor, is that we can be paralyzed in that moment going, we don't know what we need to do. But all we need to do is one incremental step. And I hark this back to myself. And again, talking about authenticity, I've had a rather interesting mental health journey over the course of many years. And I've only really revealed that in the last couple of years with the challenges that I experience. And in doing so, it's allowed me to actively work on that and work out a series of strategies for myself. And one of those is perfectly pitched for what people are going through right now. And that is one of the things that I require is exercise. I must do this at least 3 times a week. It must be at least 30 minutes in that 3 times a week. And generally it's more than this. But I often find myself in a morning going, I don't want to get up. And I'm sure that there's a great deal of people out there who can relate to this. But for me, it's a critical step, because instead of then going, I've got to get up and go out for a run, I break it down into little tiny incremental moments and go, I need to open my eyes. So all I need to do, just one thing, just open your eyes. So you open your eyes and it's all dark inside, and you sit there and think, okay, well, I've opened my eyes. And you go, well, if you've opened your eyes, you might as well turn your head. As simple as that. Okay, well, I might as well turn my head. Look at the clock. If you've looked at the clock, you might as well, why don't you just slide your feet out of the bed? Nothing more. You don't need to do any more than that. Just slide your feet out of the bed. And in doing so, each incremental step, suddenly I'm standing, I'm dressed, I'm out the door, and I'm into that process. And what happens for me is there's a moment of smiling. And it might be 15 minutes in, it might be 40 minutes in, but at some point, my face will break into a grin. And I will recognize that I'm grinning, and it will make me laugh in that moment, because the realization that I've beaten what I call the dragon of domination. It's that ever-present push down of going, oh, you can't do that. You keep focusing on it by these tiny incremental steps, and in doing so, you're able to move mountains one tiny step at a time.
Yeah, thank you so much for, first of all, sharing that with us. I know it's something you only recently started sharing on stage, and now you're speaking about it, I think, as part of your keynote, and to really inspire other people. And obviously, it can be that big dragon, or even from a leadership perspective, breaking down massive decisions into small steps. So much learning there. Something you said, Greg, really triggered for me, and I wanted to go to Tui about this, because I know that during times of stress, quite often our strengths, when compressed, pushed, go into overdrive and therefore become a weakness. So I don't know if you guys have heard that phrase, that our strengths in overdrive become a weakness. So Tui, being a strengths finder coach, I mean, if people know me, I love the strengths finder. I'm so interested in that, not from a labeling or putting people into a box perspective, but to understand what makes us tick, and that we can try to navigate, I guess, our life, so that we're operating as much as possible, particularly in our job, but also at home, in our family life, in our zone of genius as such. So can you talk a little bit about that concept of when pressured, sometimes our strengths become a weakness, and how we can avoid that?
Yeah, absolutely. What happens is, well, let's start first with, let's start at the very beginning. So you start with talent and you end with strength. So talents are naturally occurring patterns of thoughts and behaviors, and we all have natural talent. It's different from a learned skill. When you know what your natural talents are, and you can do this in many ways. Obviously, you can go online, and that you can provide the link later to do your strengths assessment online, which is fantastic. I'd highly recommend it. More than 20 million people around the world have done it. 90% of the Fortune 500 companies use it with their people. So it is fantastic. But the other thing that you can do is you could simply think to yourself, use, as Elias said, use some of the margin and the white space in your life to ask yourself the question, what do people thank me for most often? It can be as simple as that, because people do thank you. Every single person watching and everyone in life is thanked in some way, whether that's non-verbal, whether that's verbal, whether that's from a colleague or a manager or someone at home or a friend. So you can think about that question and then write down as many things as possible that come to you, which will obviously nourish you in terms of your mental and emotional well-being, but also it will give you clarity around what your potential natural talents are. When you're clear on those, then you aim them with intention towards a current challenge or a current goal. And when you create opportunities and act intentionally with your talents every day, over time they develop into strengths. And a strength is near perfect performance in one of your natural talents. So it takes time to develop your strengths. And in that time, naturally, if a talent is fairly raw, we can aim it with intention, but it might be misguided or it might be misdirected. And certainly when we are in crisis and chaos and we are not centered and grounded within ourselves, that can be when the talent or the evolving strength can be misdirected and it turns into a weakness. And really what we need, what it all comes down to, is, again, you know, as Elias said, that margin, that white space where you can have the awareness and take the time to reflect. Well, how did that go today? That didn't land very well. Why was that? Let's just unpack it a little bit and see what happened. And there you apply your growth mindset, because mistakes are, as my children say to me, mistakes are proof. You're trying, mummy. It's okay if you make a mistake. And sometimes we need to speak to ourselves as if we would speak to a child or one of our very good friends. It's okay, actually, if your talent and your evolving strength was misdirected and didn't land well. Just take the time to reflect and notice what happened and, you know, try again tomorrow. We have a new day every day. As Greg said, we can open our eyes, turn our head, look at the clock, and maybe before stepping out of the bed, we just have a little moment to connect with our values, to connect with how we want to feel and how we want to show up that day, and then hold that as an intention in your mind or even in your heart. And just a little bit of science. I love this because, again, Greg talked about our bodies have so much more to give, and often it's our mind that stops us. Well, one part of our body, our heart, which is obviously, you know, where compassion comes from, where kindness comes from. There's an institute called the Heart Math Institute who've been doing a whole lot of clinical research into the electromagnetic frequency of the heart. Yeah. And the electromagnetic frequency of the heart is proven to be 5,000 times stronger than the electromagnetic frequency that brain waves emit. And so that's why when I do strengths-based leadership coaching with people, I always weave in values. I always weave in desires. And I use my yoga and meditation practice to really get to the heart of the person. Because it's not just about using your strengths. It's about using them with intention and using them wholeheartedly and stepping into and being in integrity with your values and who you are. And a few more stats, which are really fantastic to know, is that when you focus on what's strong, not what's wrong, which is strengths-based leadership, you are 6 times more likely to be engaged, or rather 6 times more engaged at work, whether that's in the office or remotely, and you are 3 times more likely to report an excellent quality of life. And our children can do this too. There are assessments out there called the Strengths Explorer for any kids 10 years and upwards. And for them and for all of us, when we focus on what's strong, not what's wrong, and if it goes wrong and it's misguided, we can take that time, that reflection, be self-compassionate to ourselves. It increases resilience, which is what we're talking about today. It increases confidence, and it also provides hope and direction for the future, which is what we need. So to answer your question, Nat, hopefully that's answered it. But, you know, we start with talent, we finish with strength. Strengths can become weaknesses when they are misguided or they just don't land right. But that's where we step into our heart and we look at our values and we treat ourselves with kindness and self-compassion.
So brilliant. Thank you so much. I think it's so crucial to really highlight when we're talking about leadership, obviously, you don't need to have a team or be a manager, right? You know, everyone is the leader, literally, of your own life. I talk a lot about how you are the CEO of your own life. I love the way you use the word want instead of need all the time, Tui. I think it's so important that people really take ownership of the life they want to create. I'm going to read a few comments. You guys, this is really landing for people. So thank you so much. I'm really so thrilled about this today. Diane Sorrell says, great advice on so many levels by all the speakers so far. I think this is exactly what we need at this stage of lockdown. We've got Michael Fletcher. Thanks for those gems, Greg, Mr. Radio Ward, particularly linking improv, being in the now, to our life and to our current global situation. And Kay says, spot on, Tui. So yeah, brilliant insights. I mean, it's interesting. Strength finder. My second strength is activator, making things happen. And my third is communication. And it's interesting that I commenced this live stream during the COVID craziness, because I was going to do some live events, but I'm bringing you guys together and I'm just excited about the synergy between you guys. And I can't wait until we're able to meet and catch up in person. Yeah. All right, let's get Ellis for his second for us.
Look, I like to expand on what Tui has said, because I think if you go back to this whole authenticity and then look at the aspect of trust. So trust, which we created as an acronym in our business, was you start off with transparency. So Greg's mentioned, and he's been very transparent and very vulnerable about his situation. And he's giving some practical tips about, getting himself just to open your eyes, just to turn your head, just, to give yourself permission. Because when you can control some of these little aspects, that helps you to alleviate the anxiety that Tui was talking to us about earlier on. But then you take the next level and you go from the T of transparency into the R of your ring of steel. Who is your ring of steel? It's like your inner circle, your personal board of directors, as Jim Collins would describe it in his book, How the Mighty Fall. And who are you going to that you can rely on to go for advice? Because you're going to make mistakes. Let's be honest about it. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them, as long as you're able to go and understand, how do I improve and who do I go to double check things? Good grief. I mean, I've made so many mistakes in my business, especially when I've made my own decisions in isolation. So I'm going to encourage you to say, who do you go to? Who's mentoring you? Who's in your ring of steel? Who will you rely on to help you work your way through? Because the next thing is understanding risk. So now, especially in this time, we have to understand risk. We have to understand risk in terms of the physical risk. Yes, we're allowed to go out, but let's be sensible. There is physical distancing, by the way, not social distancing, physical distancing, which is important. We still need to be social and understand how to talk and behave. And if you have an online persona, be very, very careful. Understand the risks. A friend of mine once said, the difference between love and Facebook is that one of them lasts forever. So what you write, what goes out there, becomes an immortal history for people to go back and reference you. So understand the risks in business in terms of what you're doing, how you're saying, especially during these times of mass confusion, mass anxiety, and just say, take a step back. Just do that little thing. Just open your eyes, just turn your head, just calm and work your way through. Because then you're going to look at the aspect of safety online. So we know that if you're going to be using technologies like Zoom, there are so many fail safes for you to implement in the back end of your Zoom account. So a very simple situation should not interrupt the way that you're running business, but allow you to have some more safety measures put in there. And finally, look at the last T in the word trust. It's about tracking. What tracking systems are you putting in place? Tracking systems to make sure you do get out of bed every single day. Tracking systems that have that 30 minutes of exercise. That keep you accountable for what it is that you're going to be doing. Because if you are accountable, then you know that you can do something. You might be in your bubble. And I've found this amazing journey. I was global. Like Greg, we were spending a week and a half each month away from home overseas.
Yeah.
I went from global to local. And when God said go local, I thought, oh, New Zealand. No. He said local, Auckland. What I didn't realize was local is at home. You can't get much more local than that. But you can still operate in business as long as you know that you have to diversify. Tui's mentioned already about being a coach, understanding strengths and strength finders. You've got to diversify who you are. Invest in yourself now. Learn new techniques because you're going to have a practice, and a practice has multiple income streams, whether it's through authoring or through coaching or through speaking, whatever it might be. You've got different ways to generate revenue for you. And if you think outside the box, but you prepare with those margins in place now, reset for the future. Doesn't matter what's happened. You might be anxious now, but reset for the future. Draw a big black circle on a piece of paper. I don't know, do something that looks similar to this, because this becomes a reset button that you can use. I used to use this when I played Xbox with my son. I used to beat him until one day I realized he was about to beat me. So I thought, you know what? Reset the game. That way I won't lose. This is your reset button. Go and just press the reset button on your life right now. It's well worth it.
Yes, brilliant advice. Exactly. I had a friend yesterday refer to it. She said, I don't like the word lockdown. I'm going to call it personal retreat.
We call it home retreat at our
home
house.
retreat.
Yep.
Sounds so much nicer. So there we go, the power of languaging. But interesting about reset, it is a time now to pause and reflect. And I talk a lot about, often people get caught in this doing what they said they would do, doing what they think they should do, doing what they've always done pattern. And it's such a great time to go, hang on a second. What do I actually want to do, with my life, my career, my decisions? And I think a lot of people are going to actually really like working from home. I've worked from home for 15 years, but for some people, I think they're going to be like, hey, this is like the best kept secret. So it'll be interesting to see. All right, Greg, let's go to you for your next tip.
Cool. I've been making copious notes sitting down here too, Alias.
You can watch the replay too.
It's been an absolutely fantastic opportunity to be here in this space. And I particularly like the things talking around talent and strengths. And I have two children. They've just turned 12, twins, and both of them have wildly different personalities. One has very much a growth mindset. The other one has very much a fixed mindset. And so we take every opportunity that we can to provide them with our own experiences and our view of what we're seeing them do, and guide them along the way. So there's a really interesting link there between what you've just described and what's actually happening here in the home environment as well. Alias loved that acronym, the trust acronym. I'm going to take that and apply it into elements of my business and my life as well. And that's the beauty of being in an environment such as this. And Natalie, look, I've got to say this, is that this is about leadership. It's about leadership under challenging circumstances and at challenging times. And you've been a beacon in that. In this situation, being able to put things online gives us so much more scope and more breadth to be able to share information and share what we're doing. And I'd like to share what happened for me in this process of right at the beginning of the process of starting to see business drop. So that would have been 7 or 8 weeks ago. I had one client who mentioned that they were thinking about cancelling their conference. And I make my living from presenting and emceeing and hosting conferences because of the situation with COVID. And I didn't really pay it too much mind. It was like, they're just doing prudent risk checking for the organization. Then I had a meeting with them, which was online. Arrived at that meeting about 5 minutes late to hear the convener say, and that's why we're cancelling the conference. So my first thought was, no, you're not. It's not going to happen. We're not going to cancel the conference. And I pitched off immediately a virtual option. And I've had some thoughts and ideas about how we could potentially do virtual conferencing in a way that's not simply replicating the face-to-face. It's involving broadcast and television styles and motifs. And they loved it, thought it was a great idea. And we're still in that process right now of refining that to make it into a virtual event. Went off to Australia to the Professional Speakers Australia Convention, and it all came to a head about halfway through that conference, and I returned to New Zealand. And although I was here before the lockdown deadline, I still went into self-isolation because a virus doesn't know a particular time, and so I figured out a more prudent way to do this. We're fortunate because we have a space, an external office that has a small bathroom attached. So I was able to move into the space. And in the space of that week, I watched my entire business crumble. Every single event or booking that I had either cancelled or postponed, and we've got this desert. And I know this is the same for pretty much everyone within our field. But with the sense of challenge and the sense of loss came this incredible sense of relief, because as much as we're looking at it from a financial standpoint, the responsibility for doing those events now has gone. So I'm left with a beautiful, empty space. And my thought process was, after the initial kind of shock, was, wow, what an opportunity. What a wonderful space to be able to play, to be able to actually do things that I'd only maybe even vaguely thought about, to suddenly be able to do this, to build them to fruition. And so,
what an amazing growth mindset, by the way.
Yes,
that is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so for me, that was, okay, so how can I do this? And we only have what we have, right? We can't go out and get any more. This is a lockdown situation. And so I started looking around the house and found all the beautiful bits of electronic kit that I've bought from a musical standpoint and an audio standpoint, and started to put them to use. And I think my wife was really happy about that, because I might have used them once in 10 years. We suddenly get an opportunity to put them into practice. And I built myself a little virtual studio. And that process enabled me to pick up a job within 2 weeks, which I did last week for the Human Genome meeting, where I was sitting here in New Zealand going live to the world out as a virtual host on that event. So in the space of 5 weeks, I managed to pull back using the skill set that I've got and being curious about what might be. And this is one of the biggest things that we need.
Yeah.
We need to be curious about the people around us, the situations that are around us, and the things that we don't know about, we need to learn about. But more importantly, you need to be curious about yourself. You've got to think deeply and go, who am I? And what do I really, really want? And on the back of that, our company has a company name. It's not a trading name, but the company name is Peak Ward Limited. It's Peak and Ward. My wife's name is Peak. My name is Ward. And it makes Peak Ward, or Peakwood, heading towards the peak. And I always view business and life like this, is that it's a constant growth process. And each time, and I view it as a mountain. So each time you take a step up the mountain, you're learning something new. And when you learn something new, you can see more. And when you can see more, you realize that you don't know as much as you thought you did, which makes you curious, which makes you want to learn more, which makes you take another step up that mountain. And Dan Fogelberg has this beautiful song called The Higher You Climb. And the first set of lyrics in the first verse are, the higher you climb, the more that you see. The more that you see, the less that you know. The less that you know, the more that you yearn. The more that you yearn, the higher you climb. And it's a beautiful analogy for how we can continue to grow and allow ourselves that opportunity to exponentially make a difference, not only for ourselves, but for all of those people around us.
Ooh, I really wanted to break it down here, but no. Yeah.
I have to say that I'm not as eloquent as he is, but all I say is you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. So
Good point.
Absolutely.
I love the mountain analogy. I heard a lovely analogy a couple of years ago by Leonie Featherstone, and she talked about, often we look at our life and we think of ups and downs and peaks and troughs. And she said, but if you turn it on the side, life is like a winding river, right? Winding your way. And the way I talk about it, I used to work in terms of leadership. I actually used to work with students and corporates in the outward bound and the outdoors, using nature as a means for personal growth and development. So that's part of my backstory. But what I love about that in the river analogy is I think, sometimes we pull into an eddy just because we need some time to just stop and think. Well, all of a sudden, all of us have in some way have been put into an eddy, and some people are stuck swirling around, like not knowing what to do. And other people are like, this is good. I mean, I've got a friend at the moment, same thing. She saw she's in the travel industry. She saw all of her work disappear, and some people would be very much the fixed mindset, like, this is horrible. How could this happen? These things always happen to me. She was like, oh my gosh, the universe was obviously looking out for me. Honestly, I wasn't loving what I was doing. I needed a break. So I feel like part of it is our attitude and the way we respond to things. But I think the mountain analogy, or hopefully that winding river analogy, is helpful for people as well. We've got Karen, one of my previous guests, commenting, "Hi team, love your work." What were you saying, Greg?
I love that, and that analogy of placing it on turn it over 90 degrees. And make it a river as opposed to the peaks and troughs, because we often look at it in life. We say, it's a high point in our life or a low point in our life. They're not necessarily, they're just points, right? We went to another location, and how we view it. I love right from the beginning too, where you're talking about how we view our emotions and how we speak about emotions is really important, because words have power. And our own, we can be our own doom merchant, or we can be our own cheerleader, and it depends on the words that we use.
Hey, I feel like we could be here all day. We're going to go for about another 5 minutes. So what I'd love to do, you guys, is just go back to each of you separately. Can you please let us know if there's any last thing you want to add? For sure, add that in. And then how can people follow you, connect with you, learn more about what you're up to?
Got two things to say. One is, and it builds on everything that we've been talking about today in terms of curiosity and opportunity and potential. It's a question to ask yourself. It is, what did you never consider that now seems possible? So that can be a thought provocation for people. The other thing is that we are sitting here and hopefully exuding a whole lot of positivity, but there are people out there who, as you said, Nat, will be feeling really stuck and will be finding it really hard to even evoke that curiosity and positivity. And there is, of course, the saying out there that says the only constant is change, but I would challenge that. And the other constant that I believe and know to be true is your breath. So if everything is just far too overwhelming right now for you, or at any stage in the future, you can return to your breath and just take a few cycles of deep belly breath, really deeply restorative breath. And that will take you instantly from that sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight, into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. Or the other thing, if not breath, is that if you connect your forehead to any surface, so in yoga, we would do child's pose, but you can go and stand against a wall, put your forehead against the wall, or even put it on your desk, and that stimulates the vagus nerve, which then activates your parasympathetic nervous system. So if it is all too much, you have your breath and you can do that one practice. So I'd love to leave people with that. And if they want to find out more about me, then tuifleming.com is my website, and I'm on all the channels. But for inspiration, find me at Tui Fleming on Instagram, where for the last week I have been doing evening guided meditations. They just finished last night, but it was so successful and so powerful, I think that I will find a way to do more of those. And of course on LinkedIn for more business related content. Amazing. Thank you so much. I love that what Tui brings. I mean, we've been friends probably for 2 or 3 years.
don't even remember how we connected, but I know that we did connect. We're so different, but we just have the same values and beliefs. But I love what you bring in the science and you bring in the mindset, mindfulness. It's so incredible. Kay Mueller says, such an eloquent quartet. Well, thank you. Thank you. That's so great. Elias, how can people find out more, and any final words from you?
Look, I guess if I can give you 3 tips, I'm writing another book now called Leading from the Stop, because we've had to stop and just reset. So first thing is, don't sell. That's my first tip. Don't sell. People are hurting. They are in pain. They are lost. They do not need you to sell to them. Second thing is about relationships. Build relationships. I think John Maxwell was the one who said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's so important as we go into this next phase of reinventing the new economy to understand that we have to be more relational. And thirdly, I'd say record and repurpose. Always, always, always take your information. There's going to be a gem that you say. And if you have it recorded, just go to otter.ai and I'll transcribe it for you. You'll have some new wisdom that you can share. If I could add one more, it's what Tui said at the very beginning. Find your authentic voice. And your authentic voice is what's going to make you really shine going forward. And if you want to get hold of me, in fact, I put together a whole series of leadership magazines and articles that you can gain access to. If you go online to gettalk.at/Elias, ELIAS, you can get hold of a number of issues of my leadership magazine, or the lead magazine that Mike Hancock and Rock Your Life have produced, and a little ebook that I've also designed in terms of leadership lessons for this time. And my pleasure to be here with great panelists.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of these links that they're mentioning, you guys, and I'm going to put it above this post in the description and also in the show notes. So don't worry, we'll get those to you. All right, Greg.
Well, all I would like to say is to reiterate what we've all heard here today from both Tui and Elias and yourself, the fantastic elements for us all to move forward. And I completely agree with you, Tui, that there's a number of us who are grabbing the opportunity that is here, but it may not be as easy for everybody. And so there is moments of being able to reflect on what's happening for you. And what I'd like to leave people with is that there's only 2 things you are really in control of, and those are your thoughts and your actions. Those 2 things are all you are in control of, and we are in complete control of our thoughts and our actions. And it's as easy to think good of yourself and your situation as it is to think bad of yourself and your situation. And it's a choice that you have available to you right now, no matter what it is in the situation. There's a lovely quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, which is, you can survive pretty much any how if you have a strong enough why. So what is your strong why for your situation right here, right now, right in this moment? Because that's all we have. We have this right now. Future's uncertain, can't rely on it. The past is gone, we cannot change it, but we have the now, this present moment. So live now, make every single moment count, starting from this one.
And where can they find you right now?
Absolutely. If you want to connect with me, I'm on gregwardspeaker.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. I'm currently doing some webinars on virtual presenting, which is another one of the elements of skill that I'm sharing, and I'm putting those out free. And as Elias says, it's not the market here currently to be out there selling. There are certainly opportunities, and those opportunities will come. But right now, it's the sharing. What do we have? What do we have collectively, and how can we help everybody in the current situation? And going into it with that mindset, we will prevail.
Indeed. Thank you so much. I love that, like really reframing and changing the way we look at things to raise our resilience. And that's really what we're trying to do. And I think everyone is a leader in their own life, and different people are really facing this. Like, I've got friends that are essential workers and frontliners, and they are trying to self-isolate within their house with workers. Whereas I've got other friends who are like, oh my gosh, I am loving this lockdown. This is really chilled. I'm spending time with my kids. It's such a massive spectrum. But I really think that it's going to come out. Things are going to be massively different, but in a really good way. I do think it's not going to be an easy journey. But thank you so much for sharing all of your golden tips today, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
It's been amazing to hear, and I will make up the notes, which is always fun because I get to learn even more. So I'll let you guys know we do have. I'm booking into May now. This is what I do. I am my original business, The Go-To Girl, was all about connecting people, and I'm super excited to just bring all these guests together, not just for the audience, obviously, but also for each other. The synergy between people. So coming up next week, I've got Raising Resilience. We've got Melaine Lee, Natalie Sisson, who you may know as the Suitcase Entrepreneur, and also Grant Feiner from Biz Solutions coming in next week. And then we're doing Staying Well as well. I've got other leadership panels coming up, mindset and motivation, keeping the love alive, and much more. So you guys stay tuned. Thank you so much. And until next time, this is Natalie Cutler-Welsh, the Up Your Brave mentor, saying, remember to up your brave, say what you want, and make it happen. Thank you. See you.